This is the moment that this boat becomes something else. It's going to transform right before your eyes. Hi, I'm Joe, and welcome to Motor City Boat Werks. Let's get to work. This week in the Boat Werks, I'm going to be painting the hull of the Skipper 20 sailboat. If you've been following the channel for the past several weeks, months, I've been pushing along trying to get the restoration of this little sailboat to the next level. And I've done all of the work, all of the hatches, the engine well plug. I've refinished all the interior, now the exterior wood. I've pulled off the rub rail. I'll be doing that at another time. And now I'm going to be preparing and painting the hull, kind of changing its overall color scheme. There's lots of great how-to information on the internet and on YouTube about how you go about painting a boat to really get the best show quality finish. I'm not really here to talk about that. We'll cover a couple of lessons that I learned doing this Skipper 20, and then we'll move on next episode to working on the deck and getting it ready for some paint. In a previous episode, I talked about what kind of paint to choose. Be sure to check out that episode. I lay out my argument for the do-it-yourselfer using one-part paints exclusively. After a lot of debate, I decided to go with a gray and a blue color scheme. I wanted something that would kind of transform the boat. I wanted to take advantage of the blue stripe. It's on the stripe near the top of the hull of the boat, and it's also the blue that's used on the cushions and the sail covers. By choosing the blue color, I don't have to change any of this, and it'll save me a little bit of money down the road. For these low-budget restorations, my go-to paint is always Rust-Oleum. I'll often use the Rust-Oleum topside paint, but in this case, I needed some particular colors, so I just used the Rust-Oleum enamel. I say it every episode, I don't get compensated in any way for talking about these products. I have no sponsors. Affiliate links sometimes provide a small commission.
Now, I know there are salty dogs out there who will tell you that you need to have a glossy paint job. You shouldn't have any orange peel. You need to have that mirror-like finish. But I'm telling you, don't fall for that. I like to call that the paint job gambit. These type of paint jobs take time and they take money. And when you're doing a budget restoration, you really don't have much to spread around. How many times have you seen someone spend hundreds of hours, maybe $1,000 or more on paint? The paint job looks extraordinary, but the rest of the boat is garbage. Their teak hasn't been taken care of, the boat's not rigged properly, things don't work as they should, and their sails look like baggy handkerchiefs. If you only have so much time and you only have so much money, spend it across the entire boat. That's real boat restoration.
You heard me talk about the 10-foot rule in amateur boat restoration. I think it's a lesson well worth learning. Over the years, I've developed my own kind of order of work that I like to follow whenever I'm painting the hull of a boat. I start by doing basic surface preparation. The hull's got to be clean. It needs to be sanded. I'll use anywhere from 150 up to 220 grit sandpaper just so the hull has a little bit of teeth. The fiberglass will accept the paint properly. Your prep work is not just sanding, it also includes any repairs that you have to make to the surface. This is where you fill in any divots, any gouges, any sort of damage there might be to the hull. You also want to take a moment to remove any stickers or decals. This will be the time that you remove the name of the boat, any registration numbers, all that has to come off. I always like this moment because now is the time that the boat begins to be transformed into something else. Don't forget to vacuum and wipe down the surfaces in your final steps of preparation. The next step is masking. I always use the yellow tape. We've talked about this before. It gives the best edges and it allows you to get paint up very, very close to other objects. On some boats, especially if I have bare fiberglass from a repair or maybe the removal of gel coat, I'll go ahead and I'll prime the surface so that it accepts the paint. But for this budget restoration, I'm simply cleaning the hull and I'll put the paint right onto the fiberglass gel coat. The next step is to roll on the hull paint. This is going to be your primary color, the color that covers most of the surface area of the hull of the boat.
So it's time to start painting the Skipper 20, and it's going to take several coats of this gray paint to get some nice full coverage. So I wanted to get at least one coat on today. It's relatively low humidity. Over the next couple of days, the humidity is going to climb to the point where I won't be able to put any more paint. So we'll put the base coat on here. We'll get that all set up, and then we'll do the additional coats later on next week once everything kind of cools down a little bit. I waited till the end of the day because it was too wet this morning, and there was too much dew, and also then it got too hot. So
it may take 2 or 3 coats to really get the depth of color that you want. You can use the roll and tip method to get a pretty good finish. Don't worry about any orange peel. That's all part of the 10-foot rule.
if you're doing a paint job on a faux lapstrake hull, a fiberglass hull that's designed to look like wood, you got to pay particular attention to these edges here where the lapstrake is supposed to be happening. When you paint the first couple of coats, you may miss inside these edges, and that's what I'm going back right now and taking a look at. Right here, here's a good example. So we did the paint job here, but you can see it's a little light on this underside here, right?
It always happens when you're doing your paint job. Bugs will land on the surface. You might get some leaves or debris falling on the boat. Don't try to take it off while the paint's still wet. You're just going to make a mess. Wait till it dries. Remove the debris. You might have to sand it down and touch it up. Only once you've got the hull completely covered do you now go back and do your stripes. This includes your boot stripe, maybe your garboard rail stripe. It's debatable if you want to do your boot stripe after you do your bottom paint. Sometimes I'll get the stripes done ahead of time. I just think it makes it easier in my workflow. Even though the rub rail is going to cover the hull deck joint, I want to make sure that the paint goes all the way up to the deck. That way everything looks uniform. When you have a hull that has different surfaces like this faux lapstrake hull, you want to make sure you step back when you do your masking. You want to make sure your stripe doesn't have any waves or dips in it. Everything's got to look proper. On these small sailboats, choose either a garboard stripe or a boot stripe. The boot stripe is down at the waterline. The garboard stripe is up by the rub rail. Only pick one. You don't want it to be too busy. Don't forget to remove your masking tape as soon as possible. The final step is putting on the bottom paint. Even trailerable sailboats need to have bottom paint.
Today in the Boat Werks, I'm going to be painting the bottom of the Skipper 20 sailboat. A lot of people, when they have a trailerable boat, they don't paint the bottom. They don't put bottom paint on. They'll just leave the hull bare, maybe bare fiberglass, or it'll be the same color paint as the hull. But I always like to put bottom paint on a boat because once you put it in the water, things start to grow on it. It's just a great way to do some early preventive maintenance to kind of keep marine growth off the bottom of the boat. If you put the boat in water, even fresh water, or after a couple weeks, you will have some type of growth on the bottom of that boat, especially if you're in salt water. If you're doing any sort of long-term cruising, you're going to get stuff growing on it. So you want to use some type of a bottom paint. There's lots of different kinds that you can use. They do different things. That's a discussion for another episode. I'm just using some basic West Marine bottom paint that we're going to put on here. It's black. I'll just be rolling it on there. I've taped it off along the water line. There is a mark on the hull. I guess it came that way from the factory probably. You can see where the water line is, so I tried to match that up with the tape, and we'll get this on here. Let me tell you one of my tips for when you do this. You spend your time laying down your tape. You put your line there, you double check it. It looks all good to the eye. And you will adjust it as you go around, trying to make everything look good to the naked eye, right? But one of the things that you want to remember to do is at the end, when you think you're done with your tape and you're just about to open your can of paint, go back to your tape and take your hand and run it along this bottom edge to ensure that you have a good edge stuck to the surface of the boat. Sometimes when we lay down the tape, we're in a hurry. Not everything is sticking all the way around. You got to make sure you have a really good edge. If you don't do that, when you come back and you start rolling paint on here, the paint will get up underneath the tape and you won't have a straight line. Ask me how I know. And you ruin it. You got to start all over again.
Places where the boat stands where you can touch all that up when the boat gets hoisted back onto the trailer. Not bad for a budget paint job.
Well, there you go. If you've enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to go over to my Patreon page, join the Workers. That's the fan club for the shop. There's a free tier. If you don't want to contribute, that's fine. Next episode, I'll begin the tedious process of refinishing and repainting the decks on the Skipper 20, trying to get everything done before the weather turns for the worst. We want to get that thing back inside the little works, ready for the winter time. I want to thank you for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll see you next time. Stay motivated.
If you like these videos, please hit the subscribe button. These videos would not be possible without your support.